and welcome back to Off the Deaton Path. I'm your host, Stan Deaton with the Georgia Historical Society, and we welcome you to this podcast for the week of July 30th, 2026. This week on Off the Deaton Path, we're doing something a little bit different. I have three guests this week who are joining me to talk about the Whitfield Remembrance Project. Whitfield County is one of Georgia's 159 counties, and as you probably know, is located in northwest Georgia on the Tennessee border, the county seat of which is Dalton. The county was created in 1851 and named for colonial evangelist George Whitfield, though the county does not share the E in the last name, which makes it look like Whitefield. I'm joined today by Sam Gowan, Valerie Silva, and Troy Rogers, who share with us what the Whitfield Remembrance Project is all about, how they got involved, and what they're trying to do. The project is a community-based, volunteer-led initiative focused on honoring and preserving local history. It's really a remarkable story and one that relies heavily on history and memory, and I thought it was a story that Off the Deaton Path listeners would appreciate hearing and learning about. Rather than describe to you what the project is, I will let them tell us in their own words, so let's get right to it. My conversation about the Whitfield Remembrance Project begins now. Sam, Troy, and Valerie, welcome to our podcast.
It's great to be here.
So I want to know first about the Whitfield Remembrance Project. What is it? How did it start? What are your goals? Tell our audience all about this. I guess, Valerie, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. It came about around 2021 or so. Several of us who had in Dalton, local people who had become familiar with the work of the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery and had read the literature that came out of there. We just kind of started finding each other, talking to each other. And I think it was around 2021, the NAACP in Dalton hosted a meeting for anybody who was interested in starting a community remembrance project. The EJI sponsors and supports local community groups who want to engage in remembrance work. So we went through several months of just meeting and talking and finding people who were like-minded and who wanted to be part of the work. And our first project that we did together was in 2022. It was a bus tour, a Black History bus tour of Dalton, Georgia. So one of our current members, Mr. Curtis Rivers, who is the director of the Emory Center, which is the local African-American museum, which is housed in the what was the segregated school of Dalton at the time. He is an octogenarian who has a wealth of information about our community and how it used to be, what it was like during the days of Jim Crow and segregation. So we borrowed two church buses from local Black churches, and Curtis put together a bus route, and we had probably 60, 70 people from the community sign up to go on these bus tours, learning about Dalton history. Mm-hmm. And then the first project that we did that was actually sponsored by the Equal Justice Initiative was the next year. They will sponsor 3 community projects and pay for them. So we did the scholarship essay contest. They'll provide $5,000 for county remembrance projects, inviting local public high school students to write essays that reflect on racial justice in our country. So that was open to all 5 public high schools in Whitfield County and Dalton City schools. Collectively, our students were given $5,000 in scholarship money for the essays that were written for that. Another project that they sponsor is a soil collection ceremony. So part of their mission is to document the history of racial lynchings that occurred in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And if you go to the museum, the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, there are hundreds and hundreds of jars. The first time I saw them, I thought they were spice jars. And in my mind, I was thinking that doesn't make any sense. I didn't know what they were though. So as I walked closer, I saw that each jar about this big had a name on it and a county and a date. And this was soil from the site of lynchings.
Wow.
So our next project was a memorial service to the last lynching victim in Dalton, a gentleman named A.L. McCamey. And thanks to Sam and other researchers in our group, the site of the lynching was identified. And his grave, he was buried in an unmarked grave in the local cemetery. And that had pretty much, that location had pretty much been lost to history. But another member of ours at the time, Stony Ponders, a local funeral home director, was able to use his connections to actually find the spot where he was buried.
Wow.
It was not marked or anything. And together we held a memorial service and dedicated a new tombstone. And another member of our group, Shannon Bearfield, got on her ancestry.com page and researched this guy's. He didn't have any descendants, but his siblings, he was one of several siblings, and his siblings had descendants. And she was able to reach out to this man, this victim's great nephew, who his family had scattered from Dalton after the lynching, and they had lost that memory. So she contacted this guy on Facebook, and he responded, and he knew that somebody in his family had been lynched, but he didn't know that it was his grandfather's brother. He thought it was somebody much more distant.
Wow.
So we invited them up for the ceremony. They came from, I think it was Covington or Conyers, Georgia, somewhere. And that was the first they had heard of the EJI and their Remembrance Project. So that day was twofold. The first thing was the soil collection at the site of the lynching. And then the second part of the day was the dedication of the new tombstone. So that was just one of the most meaningful and powerful experiences I've ever participated in.
Yeah, let me pause you right there for a second, and I want to throw this out there to the group. So first of all, I mean, there's so much to unpack, and what you've already said. I mean, we could talk for probably an hour about this. A.L. McCamey, what year was that?
1936, right, Sam?
That's correct. Yeah,
1936, which is late in that timeline. Just questions about that has to be very powerfully emotional moment for everybody involved, I would imagine. And I want to come back to this and ask you about this fellow who came. So just to place this in a context, so you all got started in 2021 in the aftermath of George Floyd.
Right.
And of course, at that time, there was, I will say this, and I don't want to be political because we're a historical society, we're talking about history. There was more of an appetite in our country for this kind of thing, what you're trying to do, than there is now. And so I guess part of it, to start where you started, you said, did you get pushback in the community then or since at what you're all are trying to do? Does everybody see value in this, or do they see it as being divisive? And I'll tell you why I asked that question.
I would say the only pushback we've gotten has been from one or two negative comments on Facebook. If people do have negative opinions about it, they've kept it to themselves. As far as I know, other members of our group might have had different experiences, but as far as I know, we have not really gotten any pushback, because what we are doing is historical, and emphasizing the importance of historical memory as a society and as a people. It's important not to forget these things.
Yeah, and we're all from there. We're all from there, and we like it. You know, we love our home, and you know, you tell the good with the bad. We think it's great. You don't just run a race without any competition. You tell kind of the other side of things, and you know, and so I didn't feel much pushback, and we had a pretty good group there. We had some local politicians and judges there, and some older folks from the countryside. You know, just a different group of people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm just saying it was a special moment. I felt like Valerie and the group had put something together very special. It was just a good thing.
It sounds like it. It sounds incredible.
Actually, can I just finish one thing about the story about
please.
Marcellus McCamey was the name of the great nephew. And our next project was last year. We did a community day trip to Montgomery to deliver our soil sample to the Legacy Museum. Marcellus went with us, and he was able to hand it with us to this powerful visual reminder of what happened to his family just really 2 generations ago, that he just learned that story by the work that we had done. If you go to the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, it's the lynching monument, where they have big visual blocks, each county where somebody was lynched, hanging from the ceiling, and the name of each victim. So I have a picture of Marcellus standing there staring up at his great uncle's name, which has the same last name as he has. So that was just, it felt very momentous.
Did the EJI know about Mr. McCamey before, or did you all bring him to the attention of them?
Are you talking about the victim, McCamey?
The victim.
Yeah, his name is inscribed on the Whitfield County monument.
Okay, so it was known already.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Just to place this in another context, tell me about what is the racial makeup of Dalton? Do you know demographically now? Not in the past, but because I've always you're located in Northwest Georgia, correct?
Correct.
And when one thinks of North Georgia now, and maybe in the past, and maybe I'm wrong about that, you tend to think that they're overwhelmingly white communities, which may or may not be true. So educate us a little bit about where you are and where you have been.
I do not have percentages. I know they're very low right now, lower than they used to be. I know there was a lot of movement during the Great Migration out of our area.
Go ahead, it's about 4 or 5%. And like after the Civil War, it was a railroad town and a mill town, and it was 25%. And just like Valerie mentioned, there were a lot of racial purges and just kind of ugly things over the years. And folks left to go. A lot of folks went to Chattanooga because they had desegregated mills there. They could work there and things like that, or move down to Atlanta or whatever. But yeah, it's really low now. But there's a lot of folks that have been there a long time, like Curtis and some of the other folks. There's a heritage there and a history there that's still remembered.
And the reason I ask about pushback, we administer the state's historical marker program for the state of Georgia. It's not run by the state anymore, but we have put up markers to lynching victims. We have put up markers about all kind of things that you would consider an ugly part of our past. But as you said, Sam, it's part of our history. I always point out to people, when you go to the doctor, they say, "Well, give us your history." You don't just tell them about all the days you felt good. And so, and we've gotten comments from community members who go, "My God, why are you bringing that up again? You're just going to stir up controversy. You're going to stir up division." And what we found when we had the ceremony was what you've described. It was really a moment of healing, the sense that we are telling this story finally. There's a sense of coming to grips with something that's not a very nice part of our past. So I wondered if you, and as you say, not overwhelming pushback, but just people who felt like this is not a good thing for the community. But what you're saying is you really haven't had any of that.
Curtis mentioned that he runs the Emory Center, and he mentioned that folks were asking him, "Why are you doing this? In this time and that kind of thing."
Yeah.
And I thought, well, because it's there, because it's a great story, but it's different if you're, it's different if you're seen like trying to touch a nerve or trying to make people feel shamed and stuff like that. But this particular story, it's just the story of a hero, and I always want to tell the story of a hero, even if they're, even if the bad guys are maybe folks that my ancestors hung around with. But so there may be some of that, kind of under the radar a little bit.
Yeah.
It's definitely, those sentiments are definitely present that I've seen in comments towards other groups and other issues. Like, I know, what year was it that they moved our Confederate monument to a more historically accurate or appropriate location? There's been huge pushback against that.
Sure.
Yeah, wanting to put it back.
Oh yeah,
it's too expensive. It's too expensive to put that back. But.
So, Troy, I'm going to ask you, how did you get involved with this group? What's your take on all of this?
Man, Sam, my brother, He was actually my master's. I got a master's in leadership. Sam was my law professor.
Okay.
And we got connected. And man, I always say that relationships are the new form of currency. And so, man, we spent time together. And Sam would always, I work, I do public safety. So I work with a lot of young men in and out of the criminal justice system. I work with a lot of young men who are in gangs and things like that. And Sam, man, we talk about leverage credibility, man, with leverage, to help my guys. And I really appreciate that. And I always told him, man, hey, man, I got your back. You know what I'm saying? Whatever you got going on, I'm right behind you. And so he asked me to, hey man, would you mind talking about, Lon McCamey? They had a speaker part, and I was the one that was able to do the keynote speaker. So I did a lot of research on Lon McCamey, but I put a different kind of spin on it, and
Mhm.
I wrote about a 3 minute speech. I mean, if you don't mind, I can read it to you really
Yeah.
fast, and then really put a spin on what I said. So I
You don't even
called.
have to do it fast. Just do it.
Okay.
Yeah. Just
Okay.
read it. That would be terrific. Thank you.
I called the speech. Justice fell asleep. I said, I'm so honored to be here. Thank you. My name is Troy Rogers. I work with public safety with the city of Chattanooga. I want to mess with your conscience for about 5 minutes, if you're okay with it. I want to excite us about what's next. Gandhi once said, there's a higher court of conscience that supersedes all. I'm in the criminal justice world, so I kind of understand what happens when a young man is placed in custody. Reading Lon McCamey's story, I wondered how he was feeling when he was arrested. Was he mad? Was he anxious? Was he confused or was he scared? Did he feel the error would be taken care of soon? When he got out of jail, he looked over and saw the sheriff, but the sheriff was asleep. And then he looked over to see the bailiff, like Barney Fife, with his keys. All I could think about was the 1988 school days when Lawrence Fishburne said, "Wake up!" I can't holler in my man cave. Wake up! Wake up! In our community, we have to wake up to mistaken identity. We have to wake up to mistreatment. We have to wake up to bullying. We have to wake up to false imprisonment. We have to wake up to wrongful convictions. We have to wake up to low minimum wage. We have to wake up to rules that only hurt one class of people. Ben Franklin said that justice will not be served until the unaffected are as enraged as those who are. Did Lon McCamey think that he would be protected by those who were voted in office to protect him? This story talks about how the mob planned the attack, how news got around town about what they were planning to do. Let me digress for about 30 seconds to tell you how we can positively use a mob. What if we mobbed up when a family was in need? What if we mobbed up to help kids in the foster care system? What if we mobbed up to help a disabled vet? What if we mobbed up for the right resources? What if we mobbed up for kids in poverty? What if we mobbed up for the victims of violence? What if we mobbed up against victims of illiteracy? According to assessment of easy readers, kids who can't read by the fourth grade level have a 75% chance of going to jail or being on welfare. So I was excited to even when 50 cars of people came to get him, Lama came, he still tried to fight. He tried to get away. He tried to make something happen. When the chips are down, we've got to do something. We know from history that he was shot and hung. Moving forward, we are going to shoot and hang racism. We're going to shoot and hang disparities. We're going to shoot and hang unfair treatment. We're going to shoot and hang homelessness. We're going to shoot and hang systematic oppression. We're going to shoot and hang colorism. We're going to shoot and hang political fighting. My mind keeps on going back to that 58-year-old guy who had those big old keys. What could you do with those keys in our lives? How much can we unlock for our community? Would you use those keys to unlock unforgiveness? Would you use those keys to unlock community investment? Would you use those keys to unlock segregation? Would you use those keys to unlock hatred? I'm gonna say that again. Would you use those keys to unlock hatred? Would you use those keys to unlock fatherlessness? Would you use those keys to do what you need to do? The enemy to success is being comfortable. And so we're only doing our best when we're uncomfortable. So let's be comfortable being uncomfortable. Jackie Robinson once said, a life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives. So the legacy will we leave? Who will we be talking about? Who we'll be talking about you 87 years from now. Lon McCamey's death saved the lives of Zora Dillard and Frank Simpson. Lois McMaster said this: the dead cannot cry out for justice. It's the duty of the living to do the talking. The dead cannot cry out for justice. It is the duty of the living to do the talking. And that was my spiel about Lon McCamey. I wanted to take it and I wanted to turn it around into something positive. So that was my spiel.
That gave me
Well,
Justice. The
goosebumps.
name,
Gave me
the name
goosebumps
of it is
again.
the name of it is Justice Fell Asleep.
Troy, you have a gift, my friend. You have a gift. I hear a lot of public speakers, and I'm one myself. But man, that's pretty powerful, and it's a real gift to be able to take something so horrific as lynching a fellow human being and being able to see at this distance, particularly, something that we can take away in a positive way. So I can tell that that's probably a very important part of your life every day with the people that you work with, as you described, and the population that you work with, the young men that you work with. Wow, that's pretty powerful. I mean, that's really,
Thank you.
really, and I'm sure you had people in tears that day.
Man, I think Sam said we got some good reviews. I believe we got good reviews from it. It was a wonderful event. It was packed. I felt really the thing about I felt really ready to work and ready to help somebody when I left.
Hmm.
And so I think anytime we do anything like that, it's cool to have a program, but what are we gonna do when we get done? Whose life are we gonna help change? And I really felt like I wanted to do more in my
Yeah.
community after leaving the event. They did a wonderful job,
Well, I'm sure
Sam and
you made a lot
Valerie.
of people feel that way. I'm sure a lot of people went out of there, charged out of there, and thought, "Man, I got to do something," because that's the effect it had. So tell me again about some of the things that, other than identifying people in your community who have been victims of injustice. I know that there are some ancillary parts of this too. You do an art contest or ways that are you taking this into uh, schools? I mean, are younger people involved in this? It's sort of like, wow, we didn't know any of this even existed.
Well, that's kind of the reaction we're going for with our new project, which this has been Sam's idea. And we've been talking about this for the last, 18 months, and we're finally now getting it off the ground. So this is our latest project that we're working on as a group. And Sam, I think you should be the one to talk about this.
Yeah. So, yeah, Juliette Derricotte, I ran across her story a long time ago. I used to just kind of read old newspapers just to see what happened, and realized that this thing happened in my town. And I went to the Emory Center where Curtis works, and he had a little display set up for this lady. And I was so excited to see somebody else knew this story. And I used to have a picture of this lady in my office, and I told my wife about it. And when we were kind of looking for our next project, um, she said, "You know what? You ought to go big. You ought to contact the hospital, have them build a statue, call Tyler Perry, have him come give a speech for this Juliet lady that you talk about." And of course, none of that happened, but it was the gumption that I appreciated.
You
And
want to you
I
want to tell the story a little bit about Juliet?
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you can Google her name and find out kind of what happened to her, but she's not well known. But that wasn't always true. I ran across a little letter to the editor from the 1960s, where this is like in a mission magazine, and it mentioned they had missionaries in Rhodesia who were talking about seeing dogs attack black folks in Birmingham and how that really hurt their witness. And she mentioned, everybody knows about Emmett Till and Medgar Evers and Juliette Derricotte. And so these, folks in Rhodesia are asking, is the USA even a democracy? Is it a good place? So 30 years later, it was still something in people's consciousness of the great tragedies of our country. That was one of them, Juliette Derricotte, and it's not known that much now. Um, but her story intertwines with Dalton because of the way she died. And I'm happy to tell what happened. Um,
Please do.
yeah, so she was she was born in 1897. She was born on April Fools in 1897 in Athens. She had just a great life, just incredible. She worked for the YWCA. She went to college. She traveled all around the world, all around the country, going to schools, that kind of thing. She finally got a master's from Columbia, and was hired at Fisk University in Nashville as the dean of women, and that was in the 1929. And she was there for a couple years, and then one Saturday morning she was going to go home to Athens, where she was from, to visit her mother. It was a football day. She was leaving right before the game. Booker T. Washington's son played for this team. She was going to drive down with three other students through Chattanooga, Atlanta, and then to Athens. They passed through Chattanooga, met some friends there. There was a guy that ran I think had a funeral home and had an ambulance. They had lunch with him, and then they went through Dalton about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She was driving a Model A and had like a rumble seat. So her and a young man were in the front. His name was Eric. Then two others in the back. And then if you're from Dalton, Thornton Avenue is kind of Highway 41 there, and then there's Walden Avenue. Right at that intersection, right past that, she collided with another car coming north, and both cars went in the ditches. Everybody in Juliette's car was tossed out into a field. Juliette was alive, but she was really hurting. Eric, the student next to her, he had broken his collarbone, but he was okay, relatively speaking. There was a lady in the back named Nina Johnson who was unconscious, alive but unconscious, and then another lady named Miriam who had broken her arm, but she was kind of okay. The guy in the other car, him and his wife, he got out, and there was one story that he just kind of marched up and said, "Who's going to pay for my car?" And then another story that he kind of calmed down and called for an ambulance, but no ambulance ever came. Then there was another lady named Irene Mann, and she lived not far away. Again, if you're from Dalton, there's a Providence Ministry. She lived right next to that, and she saw what was happening. She drove over there, realized there was no ambulance coming, and took them into Dalton, about a mile away at the time. Now that area is Dalton, but back then it was outside of town. And this Irene Mann, she was just asking, where do you take Black folks for emergency health care? And she must have been within feet of the hospital, but she didn't go to the hospital. Instead, she found there's a young guy on the side of the road named Broderick, and his dad was a doctor. And the Dalton Hospital, it adjoins Broderick Avenue. It's named after this same family. But they took some of them to Dr. Broderick's office. Juliette went to a doctor's named Dr. E.O. Shellhorse, who had been in town for a long, long time. Nina Johnson was taken to a separate doctor. Dr. Shellhorse saw Juliette. There's another doctor next door named Dr. Alt, who was kind of the paterfamilias of Dalton doctors. He set up the medical foundation. He set up the hospital. He was kind of the guy. He came over. They both worked on her for about an hour or so. And then Juliette and Nina were both sent to what was called the Colored Sanitarium. And it's just some lady's house. It's just some lady's rental house. And they said they had done surgeries in there on Black folks. But that particular room was rented at the time. So they just put Juliette on a couch and put Nina on the bed in the living room, and just kind of left them there. The doctor said they're there to recuperate, but it just seemed like they were leaving them there to die. And Eric, again, the passenger, he called Chattanooga and he called Fisk University and said, what, we got to do something here. They're just going to lay here and die. And so their friend from Chattanooga came down. He had an ambulance. They came down. The doctor said he really shouldn't move her because she just can't be moved. But they realized that nothing good was going to happen there. That was the worst option, was leaving them there in that little rental house. So they took them towards Chattanooga to the hospital that would take them. And in an unfortunate set of circumstances, they were working on the road north of Ringgold. They had this 10-mile detour down a gravelly, rutted road. They went through the East Ridge tunnels. And so you imagine Juliette, everything hurts. Every time anything bounces, it hurts worse. The driver's trying to keep it on the flat parts and not go around the curves too fast and all that. But for an hour and a half, she just hurt. And they finally took her to Walden Hospital. It was a Black owned and operated hospital. There were other hospitals in Chattanooga that were segregated, but had a ward for Black folks. But they took her to Walden. She was pretty much in great pain for the rest of the night and into the next day, where she died. And so that's kind of the story of her death.
How old was she, and what day did all that take? What day and year did that take place?
So she died on November 7th, 1931,
Okay.
and she was 34 years old. And she was very well known. She was a speaker that traveled around the country. She was a big hire for Fisk at the time, and her death caused a lot of folks to say, "What in the world is going on here? Did they not take her to the hospital?" And so Fisk University wanted an investigation. The NAACP wanted an investigation. The YWCA, where she'd worked for many years, wanted one, and then the Council on Interracial Cooperation wanted an investigation, and they conducted one. And they went to Dalton, talked to all the doctors, talked to all the people involved in the wreck, talked to just all kinds of people working on the house next door that saw some things, that kind of thing. Put together this report, and it was very well intentioned, and it was a very thorough report. But W.E.B. Du Bois, who was close friends with Juliette, big, well connected with Fisk, he'd gone to Fisk. He did not like it. He did not trust these guys very much. The Council on Interracial Cooperation, the CIC, they very much wanted not to rock the boat. They didn't want to just start something and call people out and that kind of thing. And so they tended to kind of suggest that, well, the doctors in Dalton did everything they could. They never thought to take her to the hospital. Who knows? And so when Du Bois saw this, he was just really angry, and he kind of did his own investigation. And he talked to Eric, got statements from him. Some different folks from Fisk, who he knew well, went down there and talked to people. And he put together his own report, which he published in The Crisis, which was the newspaper of the NAACP. And it's kind of scathing. It's kind of scathing against the CIC report. And if you don't mind if I read his conclusion here.
No, please go ahead.
And
I love his title. His title is it's just Dalton, Georgia.
Yeah, get right to the point.
Yeah,
he's so quotable and poignant the way he talks. But he said, the result of all this horror was an investigation by the CIC. The report of this commission, while agreeing on the essential facts, changes and glosses over every real particular. Instead of the man who hit the Derricotte car demanding compensation, it turns out in the report that his wife helped take Miss Derricotte to town. The doctors are reported to have worked faithfully on the wounded persons and to have done everything except the one thing necessary, and that is to take him to the hospital. They ordered Miss Derricotte and Miss Johnson removed to a sanitarium where they came to see them shortly, in quotes. And above all, the report says that they succeeded in inducing the nurse in charge of the Hamilton Memorial Hospital to hesitate and say that if the patients had been brought there, possibly they would have received treatment. A statement which has falsehood written all over it, but the deed is done. Juliette Derricotte is dead. The YWCA is going to do nothing. Fisk University is going to do nothing. The CIC has already done nothing. And the whole affair, having been carefully whitewashed, is going to pass into history while the Hamilton Memorial Hospital continues to refuse Negro patients. So he was not at all happy with this process. I would just point out, Du Bois was sort of a genius of his time, but he's kind of a conflict-ridden kind of person. And I think the point of our group is to make sure that this is not going to pass into history whitewashed without somebody telling the story, even 90 years later. So that's kind of our goal there.
And are y'all thinking about putting up, doing, something beyond just what's on the internet? Are you going to have a service about this too and invite speakers, or what are your plans here?
Actually, so I can jump in here. So the plan, like I said, we've been talking about how can we remember her? How can we tell her story? We've been talking about this for over a year now, probably a year and a half. And originally our idea was to put up a historical marker at the spot she died. And then that morphed into doing something in collaboration with the hospital, maybe putting up a plaque at the hospital. And that went nowhere. But several months ago, we had the idea to kind of model it after our EJI scholarship contest, but us come up with the funds and we could come up with the rules and regulations. And what we're doing now is an art competition. So we've raised almost $3,500 in funds for prize money. So, and Sam and his assistant Emily have put together a documentary based on W.B. Du Bois's report that tells her story. Is about 20 minutes long. So we're going to push that out into the community, and then we're going to ask people to create either visual or literary art that tells the story. So all the information can be found on our website, but the call for art is open through October 7th. And on November 7th, which I believe is the anniversary of her death, we are going to have the award ceremony at the Emory Center, where we will have guest speakers and just a reception and an art show, where we showcase all the art that has been produced or written. So people are invited to either create visual or literary. So we're looking for poetry, short stories, maybe a song, anything in either of those categories. And from there, we would like to put together a traveling art show that goes wherever it is invited, that tells her story based on this art that is created.
What's the website? I forgot to ask you this. Where can people go to learn about this?
It's whitfieldremembrance.com.
And Whitfield does not have an E, unlike George
That's
Whitfield,
right.
which
That's right.
people down in my neck of the woods down here are used
It's
to
named
saying.
after George Whitfield, but we couldn't spell it right, so we left the E out.
You spelled
That's
it the right
story.
way. So
Yeah.
it's Whitfield Remembrance Project.com, did you say?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Actually, it's Whitfield. I'm sorry, it's Whitfield Remembrance.
Whitfield Remembrance.
.com. No project. Yeah.
Okay. And not org. It's .com.
.com. Yes.
So, do you know if she has family still in Athens? Are there descendants? I know you said I don't think she had children, but did she have any collateral descendants?
She
the
had
same way that Mr. McCamey did.
She had 8 brothers and sisters, and they were all quite accomplished. She had a nephew that was a Tuskegee Airman, played in the Rose Bowl and in the NFL, and but I don't know who her current people are. I've kind of done some digging into that, but it takes some time to do that. I don't know who they are. I'm sure they're out there, and I'd love to connect with them.
Yeah, I wondered if you were going to try to identify them and invite them to.
We've talked about that, but we haven't made any headway on that quite yet.
Maybe someone listening to this knows some of the Derricotte family around Athens, and can put that together. Social media is as you pointed out. I mean, I think that's how you put together the other one, the connection there. And and I want to go back and ask a question, and I want to ask this the right way. In putting together some of the stories that we have put together about lynching and some of the stuff that happened, in the Red Scare and the aftermath of World War I, with the attack on black communities in a lot of places across America, but some, of course, right here in Georgia. And there are folks in either descendants, and maybe Troy can even speak to this. There are descendants in the family, like this fellow that you found, who was Marcellus, who's descendant. That there's a sense, and I've read about this. I'm not saying that there is. That there's a sense of shame about that. That there's something, that's a story that was never told in the family. That's a story that's pushed out of the community. Have y'all found any of that to be true? It sounds like with Marcellus McCamey, it was just a matter of he knew that this story was back there without knowing any of the details about it whatsoever. So what is your experience as a group on that? Troy, I'll start with you. And you're muted, so I want you to unmute before you start talking.
Yeah, I'm just listening, man. Sam, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Let me so man, wow. A lot of I wish me working in the urban context, I really wish it was more um of those stories like that to really get to the genesis of a family. Most of my guys who are going to prison, who are violent offenders, were come from a broken system, come from a broken family, and I guarantee you it probably goes down generation to generations. I've sat in interrogation rooms, man, and heard kids cry, telling me, "Hey, man, I wish I had you in my life, man, when I was in third grade, because I was really hurting." And I didn't get my trauma. I had nobody in my life to help me navigate through what I was going through. So I turned to the streets. I turned to everything that I thought was good. The American dream for me was an American nightmare. And so, I deal with that on a daily basis. I've never had a violent criminal to just wake up one morning and say, "Hey, man, I'm gonna go blow somebody's head off." and then I'm gonna go get me some lunch. It's always a generational track back to somebody um, being disenfranchised some kind of way, i.e., poverty being the big rock, two being fatherlessness, being only having a no father in the home, three being untreated mental illness where somebody was raped and abused and things like that, and they never got the mental help to kind of deal how to communicate and also in the Black community, emotional regulation. Nobody's taught you how to regulate your emotions after it's always fight or flight, and that comes
Mm.
from brain flow. I wrote an ebook on the poverty brain, and I talked about how in the young African American males, their brains are taught flight or flight. They don't have the brain flow that teach them how to navigate or critical think. Never been able to do that because it's always been in survival mode. And so
Mm.
I hope I may be scounding around your question,
No,
but
no,
I
not at all.
know for a fact that
Hmm.
my guys, most of them who commit violence, come from a litany of violent individuals. It's just I
Yeah.
would love to go back to the grandparents, great grandparents, and kind of see what that looks like. But man, it's messed up all the way around.
Hmm.
I don't want to speak out of turn here.
No, go ahead.
So our group is mostly white. We have a couple of Black members, older Black members, who have said on occasion that in the Black community in Dalton, because there are so few left, that especially among the older generations, there's a
Hmm.
fear of bringing stuff back to the surface. There's
Yeah.
this sense that we just need to let sleeping dogs lie
Hmm.
and just bury this stuff in the past,
Right.
is the understanding that I've gotten from what has been communicated to me.
Hmm.
There was another relative that came down from Ohio, and I forgot his name, but he was doing pretty well, but he had his own business and that kind of thing. But he talked about how the family split up when Mr. McCamey was lynched, and there was a lot of shame because the police had arrested him, and there was surely he'd done something wrong. Even
Mm.
if it wasn't worth dying over, surely he'd done something wrong. So there was some
Mm.
shame about that. And we know that Mr. McCamey had not done anything wrong. He was just the closest guy. He was the closest Black fella to that particular. Is a widow lady who accused somebody of breaking in her house.
Hmm.
We know he was totally innocent. But in the modern day, and I've heard Troy talk about this, if you're a kid and your dad's shot by the police or something like that, you don't know what happens. He probably did something wrong, but he probably didn't deserve to die for it. And it's hard to kind of get over that and think, well, that it's just hard to deal with that because you assume that the authorities are doing the right thing, even in the 1930s. Um, I don't
Now,
know.
let me ask this question, and this will really kind of this is you're all familiar, I know, with the Leo Frank lynching that took place in Marietta in 1915. Young Jewish man who was pulled out of the jail cell in Milledgeville and taken back to Marietta. Steve Oney, a journalist, wrote a book about it 20 years ago called "And the Dead Shall Rise." And one of the things that he was able to do, because he started working on this book in the 1980s, was talk to descendants of the lynchers
Mm.
who,
Mm.
dealt with their own, to use Troy's words, they dealt with their own trauma, who grew up with knowing that their father, brother, uncle had been involved in something very shameful that had brought shame to their community, particularly as the years went by. And of course, mores changed, right? And the idea of pulling somebody out of a jail cell and lynching them. I wonder if y'all have in Dalton, in this wonderful ceremony or anything you're doing, has anybody come forward and said, you know what? My ancestors were on the other side and I'm here to make amends for that. Has any of that happened?
No, but you want to talk about Deb, Sam, since she
Oh
was your
yeah,
friend first?
yeah, yeah. Actually, the McCamey story was terrible all the way around. Nobody ever did the right thing at all, except for the local judge who condemned the lynching. And the next time the grand jury was in session, he rant and railed about how you guys are ignoring the legal system and taking it into your own hands. You're working for the devil, that kind of thing. His name was C.C. Pittman. He ran against Eugene Talmadge one year for governor, but His granddaughter is part of our group. Her name's Deb, and she's a lovely person. She kind of knows our history very well, and just a lovely person. But
she came to the memorial that day. I think that was the first day that I met her, and she has been participating in our monthly meetings ever since.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and back I interviewed a lady. She's since passed away. She was a black lady, but she talked about this lynching in 1936, and she remembered it. She wasn't there, but it was just such a big deal in her community. It traumatized her, and she worked in the households of white folks. She was like a cleaning lady, and she said, people would just talk about this, that they were part of that. They were there in the lynching party, and she was just standing right there. They were acting like she wasn't a human being. They just talked openly about it, and it's not hard to figure out who these people were, to be honest. But the problem with the one in 1936 was the whole town was involved. There were like 150 cars circling around the jail. Like everybody knew it. Everybody knew it. There was nothing to stop it. There was nobody going to stop that. And you can say, well, I know who was part of it, but like, it's almost easier to say who wasn't part of it.
Yeah.
My folks were around then. They probably weren't there, but they probably didn't mind that some bad guy was getting killed, so.
Yeah. So it's really a matter at this point of being pretty sure that there are plenty of descendants of the lynchers still around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible story. And you mentioned that you took soil so what is on the site of where the lynching took place now? This is always interesting too.
It's actually right next door to the Emory Center. The
playground.
Yeah, it was the playground. Yeah, when I was in school, that building was part of City Park Elementary School, where I attended school for 5th and 6th grade. And some classes were held in what was once the Dalton's segregated all-black school. I had no idea of the history of that until actually I started working with this group. I didn't know that that building had once been a Negro school. So nowadays, the rest of what was City Park Elementary is now a daycare. And so the lynching took place in the old jail, which is now, I guess, the daycare's playground, right, Sam? So yeah. that was where we held the soil collection ceremony.
Y'all are probably familiar with the lynching of Sam Hose, which happened. He was I don't remember exactly. Bring it up, and then I can't tell you exactly what year it happened. It predated this one by a long time, but it was a horrific event. The man was burned alive, and we talked about putting up a marker. We have a civil rights trail that we do for our marker program, where we put up markers to things like this, like what you're talking about. And we approached the community there, and it was a very delicate subject because the things that are there, you try to put a marker where something happened, and now it's like downtown, there's a business there, right? And the people are like, do we really want customers parking next to this sign where this man, it tells a story of a human being being burned alive for being accused of a crime, and you want to be sensitive to that. But again, it's sort of like, how many people in your community know about this now? And it's one of those things. And so I assume that you're by you're doing that, even though there's not a marker there, you've brought awareness. Has there been media coverage? There are people who'd say, you know what, I didn't know. I mean, 1936 is kind of late for a lynching. I mean, really, in the history of lynching. I think the last one in Georgia was in the late 1950s or 1940s. But have there people come forward, white people, black people, whoever they are, and said, thank you for telling the story because we didn't know it. We were not aware of this. Have you gotten media coverage? I know you said there haven't been a lot of pushback negatively, but has there been the other? Has there been positive?
We've got a lot of personal comments who would say, I did not know that. Thank you for doing that. Very, very appreciative stuff. We've not gotten much media, although we're not good at that, to be honest. That may be part of the reason. But we've gotten a lot of very positive feedback. It moved me, and it moved other folks just to know that those things are remembered, that we're all working together. We're all part of this, and we remember these things, these horrible things that happened, and we want to do better.
So you mentioned at the beginning some of the things that you're working on, and Valerie, I didn't mean to cut you off as you were sort of going through what's coming next, and I don't know if you finished that, but what plans do you all have going forward? Are there a lot more stories to tell? I mean, it's one of those things where you would hope that you run out of stories eventually, I guess, but
I don't,
Maybe it's bigger than that.
I mean, Lon McCamey was the last lynching that occurred. We've out of 5 documented
Mm,
racial lynchings in
mm,
Dalton. So
mm.
we've talked about maybe going back and doing a similar service for one of the other or all of the other 4, but there's no scarcity of stories to tell, I don't think. So we've been so focused on our Juliette Derricotte project
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for the last several months that we haven't really looked past that. But now we've finally gotten some momentum on this project. We want to make this as special as our McCamey project ended up being.
Did I mention you mentioned just media? We're very very proud of the judges we have for our art contest. Juliet went to Talladega College in Alabama,
Mm.
and they have a very famous alumna named Honore Jeffers, who's a writer who wrote the love songs of W.B. Du Bois. It was an Oprah Book Club selection. Barack Obama selected it for his
Mm-hmm.
one of his books of the year. She's going to be our literary judge, and she said she'd read every single
Oh, wow.
selection and pick one. She said she'd try to come to Dalton too. She really loves Juliette Derricotte, that story. She wants to be a part of this. And then our sculpture artist is Isaac Duncan, who does sort of abstract stainless steel architecture. He's done or statue sculpture, I guess. He's done some stuff for Georgia Tech. He's done some stuff for the city of Chattanooga, all around. Honore knew who he was, and he's also been very incredibly generous with his time and talking to us. And they have put the word out, and a lot of the attention we've gotten is because of those guys. So we're very proud of them and appreciative of them.
That's terrific. Does Fisk University know about it? You may have mentioned this already. If I'm asking
We've
to
talked to
repeat
them. It's again, it's just you send emails and give a phone call, and
it.
you forget about things and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So
Do they
uh,
remember her there? Do they
you know,
know
I
the
went up
story?
there. I went up there and just kind of knocked on doors a little bit, and the archivist knew who it was. There was another librarian who had kind of done a display for civil rights, and she did not know who she was.
Mm,
So it's not as prominent as I thought it would be, to be honest.
yeah.
Um, but um, but that
Do you,
that's just a very small sample of. I talked to 4
yeah.
or 5 people,
Well,
and
sure.
yeah,
Yeah. And I asked you this before we started, but she's buried in Athens.
that's correct.
Do you know the cemetery?
It's called Pilgrim's Gospel Cemetery. It's kind of in the east part of town.
I think we put up a marker about that cemetery some years
Okay.
ago. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thank you for putting that out there. I'd like to visit there the next time
Uh,
I'm
Well,
in Athens. And yeah, go ahead, Valerie.
like you said earlier in this conversation, if anybody in Athens can connect us with any of her existent family members, if anybody listening can connect us with anybody at Fisk, we'd love to have participants from Fisk and also Talladega College.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, yes, and I hope there's someone listening, and I know we've got people in Athens who listen to this who can help you do that. Well, I want to be mindful of your time. If there's anything else that you want to tell me and our listeners about the Whitfield Remembrance Project or anything you all individually are doing, Troy, it sounds like you're doing God's work every single day. I mean, I know you all are. Valerie, I know you're a teacher. Sam, you're an attorney.
Mhm.
You all are doing this for volunteer because you believe in it, and it's people like you who I think make all communities really proud. And as we approach the US 250, I think about the stories you're telling too. That's all part of our history as well. Um, Much of it painful, but it is necessary, I think, that we remember it. So I'll leave the last word to any of you who want to chime in here. Is there anything else you want to tell us?
Just another plug, if anybody that's listening to this is in Whitfield County and would like to be part of our group, we're always looking for new members of our group to help us with these projects.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say thank you for the opportunity, Sam. Thank you. I want to brag on him. That's
mhm.
my brother, man. I appreciate him all the time. He looks out for guys. He don't have to do it. Sam ain't it. He don't have to do nothing that he does. But I appreciate him leveraging what he has and who he is for the betterment of Chattanooga. Man, Valerie, great to get to meet you, and I'm excited about where we're going. Stan, I did write a book, and I can get your information. I'd love to send you a book. It's called The Unseen Work, The Ministry of Public Safety. And so I just talked some of the things that I kind of talked about a little bit today. I wrote a book about 177 pages. I give you some quantitative stuff, then I give you some qualitative stuff. But I want to really just get, anybody out there that can help save a life. We got to get it on the other side, what I'm saying, before incarceration, prevention and intervention, man, because once they come out of jail, man, it's really hard. Frederick Douglass said it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men.
Mm.
And I'm a living witness, man. It's hard. We need to get them. We need to try to help them not even go that way. Because once you get out of that, Michelle Alexander's book talks about it. Once you come out of that system, man, it's really, really hard. So, man, thank you guys. I've really enjoyed myself.
Back at you, Troy. Troy's 24/7. If I could just end with Juliette's motto was, "There's much more to know than I'm accustomed to knowing. There's so much more to love than I'm accustomed to loving." Her mission in life, she talked about how hard it was to love people who hated her, how hard it was to serve people who wanted nothing to do with her. But that was her job. That's where she found her fulfillment. That's where she found her unconquerable peace, as she called it. And that's kind of the name of our contest. But she's a truly impressive lady, somebody who can still has a lot to teach us. And I'm very honored to be telling her story. And thank you, Dr. Deaton, for letting us be on here.
Well, the pleasure's been mine. Sam Gowan, Valerie Silva, Troy Rogers, all of you, congratulations on the work you're doing. Best of luck going forward for this great, wonderful project. I want to keep in touch. Troy, I'd love to read your book. You're doing great work. Keep it up and let me know what I can do to help. Thanks so much for coming on here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My thanks to Sam Gowan, Valerie Silva, and Troy Rogers for joining me on this podcast. You can find out more about the Whitfield Remembrance Project at whitfieldremembrance.com. That's WHITFIELD remembrance.com. The hardest working producer and engineer in show business, the producer of this podcast, as well as the czar of our Tallahassee office, is our very own and indispensable Brendan Crellin. Learn everything about the Georgia Historical Society at georgiahistory.com and the Georgia History Festival at georgiahistoryfestival.org. If you're a fan of Today in Georgia History, and who isn't, check it out at the completely redesigned website at todayingeorgiahistory.org, and you can see it and hear it currently airing twice a day on TV and radio on Georgia Public Broadcasting. You can find this podcast anywhere you can find podcasts, including Podchaser, YouTube Music, Spotify, and of course the podcast app on your phone. Wherever you listen or find it, please like, follow, subscribe, and share, and drop me a line at sdeaton@georgiahistory.com. Be sure and like Off the Deaton Path on Facebook as well. You can also treat yourself to every Off the Deaton Path podcast, blog, and video ever created at deatonpath.georgiahistory.com. Stay safe, stay strong. I'm Stan Deaton with the Georgia Historical Society. As always, thank you for listening.